Hello again. So this time I'm pleased to say there's going to be no apology for not having done anything, because done quite a bit of work on the piece about memory that I mentioned last time. So that's mostly what I'll be talking about. I started some practical work on it. I think I mentioned that it was going to be about camera sounds. So I've recorded all the cameras that I have here, which is my DSLR that I'm shooting this on now. And my film SLR camera, and I've got a Canon G11 compact camera as well, which makes very digital noises, and my phone camera. I think it's quite important actually with this to include phones and not just I think it's quite important to include phones and not just official cameras, simply because phone cameras now are pretty much the default, I think, for a lot of people. Yeah, they're just what we capture our everyday lives with, generally. So while the sound they make is perhaps not so satisfactory as a lovely film camera with its marvellous mechanical clunk, I think it's also a sound that is important in this piece. Now, I think I talked about the idea being that it was going to be about photography and about photographs as a way of capturing memory, and those ideas have kind of changed a bit over the last 2 weeks. I'm now thinking more about photographs as almost generators of memory, in how we look at photographs and then we remember the things that happened, and the more we look at them, the stronger those memories get. But also that there are, certainly for me, I find there are certain photographs where I actually no longer know whether what I'm remembering is the event that was captured or whether I just remember the photograph. And that's something I find really interesting, because it's kind of like a false memory, that you think you remember something, but actually you recall so little detail that you don't really recall much beyond what is in the photo. And so that's sort of changing the perspective of all of this a little bit. I'm not quite sure what to, but yeah, it's moving on, which is really nice. It's starting to feel like it's all coming together a little bit. I mean, with the cameras, I've been also thinking about audio recordings, in particular cassette recorders, because again they make marvellous clunky sounds. Yay, analog. But thinking about recordings as being equivalent to photographs and field recordings. I've got quite a lot of field recordings that I've made on an assortment of equipment, going, digital ones, and I've got ones that I made on mini disc, which are all covered in disc noise, which could be quite interesting. I've even got some very ancient cassette tapes of various things that I recorded way back in like the late 80s, early 90s, which could be quite interesting to look at again, or just hugely embarrassing. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, so I've also been reading this book, which is Georges Perec's Species of Spaces and Other Places. I don't know if you can, is that going to focus on that? No, I don't think it is. If I put it back here, maybe you can see it. He has marvellous hair. Perec's been one of my favourite authors for a very long time, and I actually hadn't read this book, even though I've had it for over 10 years. So it was really good to read it, and he's got some interesting things in there about memory and about his own writing and how that relates to memory. And he talks, in it, there's a part where he talks about sort of using both personal memory and also fictive memory, sort of invented memories, and I thought that could be an interesting thing to explore. I'm not quite sure how. It might be something to do with how I put the field recordings together. There might be some kind of narrative element in there which may or may not be apparent in the final product. But it's been an interesting thing to think about in terms of drawing everything together. I've also been thinking about what plans I need to make for the photos and recordings that are going to come out of this performance, because one of the things I'm planning on doing with the cassette recorders is to actually record what we're doing on tape, so that the quality will be a bit and yeah. And I think that might be quite interesting to have afterwards, to have this very much a point of view recording, because it'll probably be to one side in the performance, and so very unbalanced. And in that way to match up with the idea of the photographs being taken from the point of view of each performer and the kind of overall view that might give of the performance. But I've been thinking about what I can do with these, and while I obviously have no idea what the quality of this material is going to be like ultimately, I mean, I love the idea of making that into some kind of installation or exhibition, but I just have no idea how good things are going to be, and I don't quite know what sort of opportunities I could find to do that. But I am thinking that it's certainly going to be appropriate for like an online space. Thinking maybe it needs its own small site that can then tie it into the performance. So there'll be like a performed part and a follow-up part, which may have a different name actually. The piece itself at the moment has the working title of Aide Memoire, but I'm thinking that the resulting media might actually have a different name, and it'll be like a two-part piece. This bit's very, very vague. I don't quite know what I'm doing there. Yeah, so apart from that, I've been busy with writing an article about community of objects, which has been an interesting experience, and it's taking a lot of time at the moment, but is really worthwhile for getting my thoughts in order there. I've also been doing some drawing. I've got a project called Black Book, which I started about 2 years ago, and I spent a fair chunk of time on that at the beginning of last academic year when I was trying to come to terms with being an artist. Still trying to come to terms with that. I haven't quite got there. I find it really good for getting my brain back in the zone a bit, which kind of doesn't make any sense because they're drawings that don't have a whole lot of thought to them. They're quite intuitive. They're more about exploring a visual language, and it's been quite interesting. Sort of the first couple were just like rubbish. I really was not at all happy with them. They didn't feel coherent. I didn't feel like I was in control of my materials. But there have been a couple that I'm quite pleased with, which are sort of taking a slightly new direction from the rest of the book. And yeah, I'm quite pleased with a couple of those, and it feels like that's progress, and I want to do more of that, but I'm now running out of books, so I'm going to have to start something else to do similar sort of things. I think would be a useful project to carry on, just to keep that kind of train of non-thought really going, because it does seem to be useful in my work, and ends up leading into other things. Yeah, so that's been it for the fortnight. Yeah, so I'm quite pleased with where things are with Aide Memoire. It's starting to feel like a real piece now, whereas before it was like vague ideas that may or may not actually work. Now I'm feeling it's a bit more coherent and starting to coalesce into an actual piece, which I'm quite pleased about. I've got a bit of a deadline for putting stuff together, because Bastard Assignments have set up our first session up at Snake Maltings in Aldeburgh. We've got a few days there in September, so by the time we go up there I need to have something performable that can at least be tested while we're up there, because it's such a great opportunity to run some stuff and just see where this is going, and yeah, see if any critical changes need to be made. Yeah, so thank you for watching. If you like this, please give it a thumbs up. Any questions or comments, do leave a comment below, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.